Hello, all of you. Welcome to class 10. We all are moving to our next NCRT, that is Democratic Politics of class 10, the second part of Democratic Politics. And here you will learn very, very interesting things. I'm sure you have covered all the lectures that we have done gone through in the previous classes from 6 to 9. If not, then please keep revisiting them. And even if you have gone through them, if you have seen all of them, please do that again. These things are to be done. They are to be digested. You need to imbibe them. These are the NCRTs. We cannot move ahead without the NCRTs, without mastering the NCRT. So continuing this NCRT series, today we'll start with democratic politics. And here's the first chapter that is given here. It talks about power sharing. It tells us about power sharing, how power is shared between different layers of government. And it gives us an example from Belgium and Sri Lanka, two examples it gives us. And what happens in Belgium, what happened, the composition, the population of Belgium is not very similar. There is quite some heterogeneity over there. Now, what is that? Let us try to see. The minority French speaking community was relatively rich and powerful. So, French speakers were minority and they were rich and powerful. Now, this we will witness many places. You will witness this that minority is having more power. This was presented by the Dutch speaking community who got the benefit of economic development. So we see two classes, French speaking, Dutch speaking. Dutch are the people of Holland, French, you all know, the people of France. So this led to tension between Dutch and French speaking communities during 50s and 60s. Tension between two communities was more acute in Brussels. Brussels presented a special problem. The Dutch-speaking people constituted a majority in country, but a minority in the capital. So in one city they were in minority. However, in the rest of the country they were into majority. Now something similar happened in Sri Lanka. Now, without going into what is written in the book, I'll tell you something. Everything about what happened in Sri Lanka. You can read this one paragraph on your own. Now, once you hear this, things will become more clear. So in Sri Lanka, what happened was uh, Sinhalese. Sinhalese used to live there, who followed Buddhism. Now, it was not a religious sectarian conflict at all. So Sinhalese were living there since the advent of Buddhism, 5th century BC, 4th century BC. From India, Buddhism spread to several places like Tibet, like Sri Lanka, like Thailand, like Cambodia, like Java, Indonesia, Japan. Every Buddhism originated in India. So wherever Buddhism went, it's from India only. Of course, different countries have different flavor to have added their indigenous flavor to Buddhism. Now coming back to this, Sinhalese were there, and when English came to Asia, when imperialism and colonialism, I'm talking about 16th, 17th century CE, 16th, 17th century, when Europe was engulfing, Europe was annexing the entire Asia and Africa. So during that very process, England occupied India. That we all know, and you have to read this in great details in your history, paper one, modern India. Everything you have to know about this. So these Englishmen started plantation agriculture. So what was this plantation agriculture? This was more to do with cash crop. There's this term in given in the NCRTs in geography book, cash crop, which is not grown for consumption, but for not for indigenous consumption, but for selling for commercial purpose. Rubber, jute, cotton, tobacco, sugar, tea, coffee, all these were cash crops. These were introduced by British. So on some small scale, farming was going on in our country also, but British made it on a very massive. The vast Assam and Darjeeling tea states, you must have seen the pictures or been, some of you must have been there. So they took to plantation agriculture in Sri Lanka, and they needed people who can work on this field. So they took Tamils from Tamil Nadu, a part of India, to these Sri Lanka. Now, these Tamilians stayed there for 100, 150, 200 years. Once the British were gone, the Tamilians stayed because having migrated to that very place, three to four generations back, someone came there in 17th century. Now they are the fourth generation of that very person. So Tamil and Sinhalese. Now see the demography. The major social group are Sinhalese speaker and the Tamil speaker. Now confrontation started between these two people, these two, the Tamils and the Sinhalese, and that manifested in the deadly form of what is called Liberation of Tigers for Tamil Illam (LTTE). They demanded a separate Tamil country from Sri Lanka. So same thing is given here. So what happens in majoritarianism? There is this term called majoritarian. Now, what is majoritarian? Democratically elected government adopt a series of majoritarian measures to establish Sinhalese supremacy. Yes, once because Sinhalese were there in majority. So once Sinhalese were in such a position that they can frame they can decide who will be the government. So governments once elected, which is by the vote of largely by the vote of Sinhalese, it starts working for the cause of Sinhalese. Tamils were marginalized. Tamils were eventually marginalized because of this. So an act was passed to recognize Sinhala as the only official language, thus disregarding Tamil. You see, language is a very emotive issue. You will learn about JVP committee when we'll start with the Indian Constitution part. You will see Andhra Pradesh, on what basis Andhra Pradesh was created. Telangana, you all know, again created on several linguistic factors contributing to it. So many states in India, like Gujarat, was carved from Maharashtra for linguistic causes. Language is a very emotive issue, not only in India, in everywhere in the world. So government followed preferential policy that favored Sinhalese applicant for university position and government jobs. New constitution. So you see discrimination coming straight from the government. So alienation among the Sri Lankan Tamils increased because they were largely marginalized, sidelined. Now that left them with nothing but to take to guns. And that is where LTT comes from, the Liberation of Tigers for Tamil Ilam. Now, yes, here it is. Tamil Illam. Illam is the Tamil word for country. So by 1980s, they started demanding this, and now Sri Lanka faced a civil war because two major communities, the Sinhalese and Tamils, were confronting each other. Violent clashes were happening. LTT was a terrorist organization. It had its own army. Prabhakaran was the leader, and finally a massive operation was launched, and he was killed. But then Sri Lanka, bloodshed happened. Sri Lanka has witnessed long violence for a quite long time. India had earlier sided with Tamil Eelam. Ideally, should not have, because it's same thing. Like anyone, if anyone talks to uh, an Indian about plight of Kashmiris, I'll tell you what my response is. I always tell them that we have a Supreme Court in India, an unbiased highest court which will look into these things. Non-Indians will not have any stake here. If anyone has been wronged in Kashmir or in any part of my country, we have an independent, a fiercely independent judiciary, a government that is acting as per the constitution of this country, not on its whims and fancies. So India plunged into Sri Lanka. India sided with LTT, provided them with material, relief, training. Everything is on record. Mrs. Indira Gandhi and Mr. Rajiv Gandhi did that. Now, later on, it was realized, wisdom dawned upon the Indian leaders that we should not have done that. We need to check Sri Lankan Tamil Ilams in Sri Lanka. So India sent IPKF, the Indian Peacekeeping Force. And this IPKF was hated by Sri Lankans, by the Tamils, by Sinhalese, by Sri Lankan army, everyone. And it was a disaster. And we lost our prime minister also. Rajiv Gandhi was killed by LTT terrorist. A human bomb was used for the first time. A 19-year-old girl blew herself along with Rajiv Gandhi. So India lost its prime minister to this sectarian conflict going on in Sri Lanka. Now, having said this, what we are trying to emphasize, what this book is telling you, that there are fault lines within every country. Now, who better than us will know that? In India, there are so many fault lines. South India, North India, region, language, color of skin, caste, food habits, everything. There is rich, poor, all these divides are here. Rural, urban, So these fault lines have this potential to manifest into worst form of tension that can lead to what we witnessed in Sri Lanka as civil war. That is why constitution is important. Constitution gives you a set of rule that whosoever is government, whether elected by majority or by a coalition of all the minorities, whosoever is in government, it should not have an arbitrary approach. The approach is already mentioned in the constitution, the supreme text. And that is why we chair this constitution. That is why we should always abide by this constitution. It has been given to us with much deliberations, keeping in view the various fault lines that have existed in India. So attempts to accommodation were made in both countries, Belgium and Sri Lanka. Now, Belgium is currently doing fine, and Sri Lanka also post LTT, the killing of Prabhakaran has largely turned okay. There is no such thing which was there some 10-15 years back. So that brings us to a question: why power sharing is desirable? Two different sets of reasons. This is where the actual our content of this chapter starts. Firstly, power sharing is good because it helps to reduce the possibility of conflict between social groups. Me and you have equal stakes in power, or our respective share in power will not fight each other. Since social conflict often leads to violence and political instability, power sharing is a good way to ensure the stability of political order. Imposing the will of majority community over other may look like an attractive option in the short term, but in the long run, it undermines the unity of the nation. Tyranny of majority is not just oppressive for the minority, it often brings ruins to the majority as well. We have seen two examples. Now, there is second deeper reason. Power sharing is the very spirit of democracy. A democratic rule involves sharing power with those affected by its exercise and who have to live with its effect. People have a right to be consulted on how they are to be governed. Yes. So people must be assured that they have a stake in power. A legitimate government is one where citizens through participation acquire a stake in the system. This is what I mentioned just now. The next line. So it is prudent for everyone. And prudential reasons stress that power sharing will bring out better outcomes. Moral reasons emphasize the very act of power sharing is valuable. So you see both ways, feasible also and worth moral value also. Now, some examples are given here that I would skip because these are meant for class 10 student kids. Now, forms of power sharing. Which are the forms? So power is shared among different organs of government, legislature, executive, judiciary. You see India, this point will come very handy here. Legislature, where laws are being made, the parliament and the state assemblies, the Vidhan Sabhas, executive, the one who makes those laws and implements those laws. I have discussed it, I am discussing it again. Executive is divided into two parts: political executive and permanent executive. Permanent executive, all of you, when you will qualify your UPSC, you will become permanent executive, which means the bureaucrats, the state PCS officers, the All India Services officers, they are permanent executive. Once they crack the exam, they remain until retirement. Political executive, MPs and MLAs. Why? Because every 5 years they might change. Okay, so they are called political executive. They both work in tandem. They both cooperate with each other to make, frame, and implement the policies. Judiciary, you all know, the courts of India, headed by the Honorable Supreme Court, seated in Delhi. Beneath that Supreme Court are the several high courts in state, and beneath those high courts are the local courts, the lower courts, the session court and the district court. So this is how the horizontal distribution of power is. The Constitution of India is at the top, which gives legitimacy, which gives power to the three organs. What are the three organs? Legislature, executive, judiciary. Where are these three getting their power from? The Constitution of India. I hope you understood this. If not, feel free to text me in Telegram. But I hope you will understand from this. So each organ checks the other. India functions on what is called checks and balance. See, Constitution of USA says that the American judiciary is supreme, which means if federal court, the counterpart of Supreme Court in America, if federal court says something, Donald Trump cannot do anything. If the judiciary says anything, it will prevail. The president cannot do much. In England, it is the parliament. If parliament passes a law, the Supreme Court of England cannot do anything. In India, constitution is highest. So what happens here? checks and balances. How checks and balances? If the parliament, which means a legislature, passes a law which is not in accordance with the constitution, judiciary will scrap it. Judiciary has scrapped many such laws. I'll give you some examples when we'll complete these things in CRTs. So if legislature passes a law that trespasses or goes against the constitutional values, judiciary would scrap it. And if judiciary does, if a judge does something, if a judge of High Court or Supreme Court engages into act that is unbecoming of a High Court or Supreme Court judge, the Parliament will remove that judge. Okay, so you see checks and balances. The organs are checking each other. No one can encroach into the other territory. No one can encroach into the other's domain, and they must perform as per the constitution. This is how each of them check and balance each other. Executive also checks, but these examples we shall see later. Now, three horizontal levels we have seen. Now come to the government at different levels. General government, how it India, it is central or union government. Now there are government at provincial or regional level also. State governments are there. All states have a state government. So here we see the power sharing. Now panchayats have also emerged. So the third layer. So sharing of power between state and union is called federal structure. There must, yeah, see here. Federal division of power. This is called. Some things state government will decide, and the other things union government will decide. This is called the sharing of power at different layers of government. Now, it can also be shared among different social groups. Community government in Belgium is an example, and there are constitutional and legal arrangement in some countries whereby socially weaker section in women are represented in the legislature and administration. Now, it is applied in India as well. In panchayats, you see one third of the seats in panchayat, as per the Indian constitution, is reserved for women. So only women can fight on total one third of the seats that is available and that is there in the panchayat. So this way, we have ensured that vulnerable sections are also represented in power. Now, power sharing arrangement can also be seen in the way political parties, pressure group, and movement control or see. In a democracy, citizens decide what will happen. Okay. Now, the, because citizens are also divided into several groups, you see, FICCI is there, CII is there, Chamber of Indian Industries. Now you have a Mazdoor Sangh, which represents, this body represents the interest of Mazdoors. Mazdoor is the laborer. You have a Kisan Sangh. Kisan Sangh represents the interest of farmers. You have a Vyapari Sangathan. Vyapari Sangathan takes care of the interest of businessmen. So all these are what? They are pressure groups. You have so many women organizations mushrooming up, so many child welfare organizations mushrooming up, nothing for male as such. So you see various interest groups are coming up. They are trying to assert their pressure on the government. Like before budget, all these Mazdoor unions and these Vyaparis and these Chamber of Indian Industries, these farmers, they meet the finance minister, they lobby with the finance minister, they make sure, they try to persuade him that please, her right now, finance minister is a lady right now, so they try to persuade her that please make such provisions, such budgetary provisions that we are benefited. So again, it is a part of power sharing. You are not actually sharing power, but you are in such a position because of your group that you are able to assert your group's interest. This is also a part of power sharing. So coalition politics is also here. So we see different versions of power sharing. So this is how things are been given in your chapter, this first chapter. And actually, just to sum it up, power sharing can happen between different organs of the government, between same organs of the government. Different organs are legislative, executive, judiciary. Same organs are state government, panchayati raj, union government. Third one is interest group. I gave you the examples. So this is what is given in the first chapter. I hope you all understood. In case there is a doubt, please ask your questions in your group. I'm more than happy to respond to it. I might not respond immediately. It's humanly impossible to always check the phone. But yeah, I'll respond to each and every query. This is a word from me. So please keep studying, work very hard, and take good care of yourself. See you all tomorrow. Bye.